We have a second name that is on that wall this year, and his name was Platoon Sergeant Delaney Ernest Miller Jr. As many of you remember, back during Vietnam, it was a really bad time. It was a time of change. There was a time when boys were being sent off. They were just kids being sent off to a war that they didn't understand. It wasn't popular. Some of those boys did not come back home. Some of them came home wounded. Some came home only in their body, not in their mind, because of the fact that they were so severely injured. Some of them paid that ultimate price, and such was Delaney Miller. If he was in the Big Red One, he could have been in safety at the time, but he was supposed to be on R&R. But he was trying to do what was best for his family. He gave up his R&R to buy it. I thought it was a dryer, but somebody told me it was a washer. And so he was in the battlefield when he could have actually been in the safety of being on R&R. According to the Vietnam Virtual Wall, on June 8, 1966, Platoon Sergeant Miller laid down his life from multiple wounds at the age of 30 years old in the province of South Vietnam. A family should never have to endure this kind of loss, and I extend that also to the Osborne family. A family should never have to pay the loss of a loved one like this. And right now we'll bring Keith Miller to the platform and let him speak.
I also hope mine don't blow away. First of all, thank you to the veterans here today. We're so proud of your commitments to serving this great nation in this town of Lebanon, Licorice County. Thank you to Donna Mason for your team and all the hard work of not only making today happen, but also I was also incredibly touched when you made the comment to me that these were not just names on a plaque. These were real people. People of this community. You have created the Fallen Wars Memorial to show that every person here not only has given their lives in serving this country, but also had an influence in shaping Lebanon and Licorice County. Thank you to Marvin Bassnett. I don't see Marvin. I saw him earlier. Thank you, Marvin, for remembering that my father was also part of this group and part of Lebanon. Thank you also to Dick Cochran, not only for helping here, but for being my pops. Mr. C, my second dad. I could go on and on with thank yous with so many people in Lebanon that helped my brother Kevin and I. But my real job here is to introduce my father, Delaney Ernest Miller Jr. I'm actually glad he didn't call me the third. It's a long name. Now, he moved to Lebanon in 1961. Not too many people here really knew him. At that time, he was already 7 years into becoming a career Army man. I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce my father as a son, a soldier, a husband, a father, and a leader of men. As a son, Del, as my mother called him, was born in Front Royal, Virginia on June 23, 1935. Front Royal, Virginia is about an hour west of Washington, D.C. Early in life, his mother, Polly, named him Bugs, a name that stuck with him the rest of his life. Bugs had an older brother named Reuben. They called him Skeeter. Because Dad died just after I was 4, I really didn't know a lot about him or my grandparents on his side. So when I was attending SMS in Springfield in the early 1980s, I decided to take a trip by myself to meet my grandma Polly and learn more about my dad's childhood. She told me all kinds of stories while I stayed 4 days in the same house in the same small town that he grew up in. One story that really hit me was when they were little tykes. Bugs and his brother Skeeter were playing with two other boys near the Shenandoah River. The Shenandoah runs right next to Front Royal. Skeeter fell into the river, and while one of the 14-year-old boys tried to save him, my father saw his older brother drown right in front of him. Dad was 7 and Skeeter was 9. Wow. Dad graduated high school there in 1953. As a soldier. He was enlisted in the Engineer Corps of the U.S. Army in 1954, July, at 19 years old. This took him to Fort Riley, Kansas, where he trained to become an engineer and an Army Staff Sergeant. He was transferred to Fort Leonard Wood in 1959 to take part in some special training operations. In August of 1962, he began a tour in Germany for additional special ops training that took him to Munich, Bamberg, and Würzburg. In 1964, he returned home, and after a year of us all living in a trailer at Fort Riley, Kansas, he moved back to Lebanon to a house over here on Clark Street. In September of 1965, he began his tour of Vietnam. As a husband, Dad was married to Edna Mae Kinchelow, my mom, on June 14, 1961, after eloping to Miami, Oklahoma. To just say they were in love would be an understatement. I have countless letters that he wrote to Mom while he was stationed away, and in every one he writes, "I love you," over and over and over again. In December of 1965, while in Vietnam, he wrote that he had been promoted to platoon sergeant E7 and said, "I love you," 14 times in the letter. It was a little corny, if you ask me. How much does she love him? Well, after being together only 6 years before he died, she never ever considered remarrying until she passed away 38 years later, in 2004. As a father. Kevin, you want to step up here for a second? You might hold on to these. This is my brother, Kevin. These are two photos that were taken the year of 1966 of Kevin and I, right after Dad passed away. As a father, even though I was 4 when he was killed, I do have a few fond memories. Like when he spanked Kevin all the way up the stairs for sticking his tongue out at him twice. And then giving it to me too after I watched the whole thing. I stuck my tongue out too. He was a military disciplined father. He taught us how to spit shine combat boots, and he took us to a few NCO club pig roasts. Two traits that I know that I learned directly or indirectly from him was what it meant to be a gentleman and the importance of working hard first and then playing hard next. He took his work very seriously and his play, well, not so seriously. To show what type of father he was, Kevin was actually born Kevin Wayne Mitchell. One day coming home from Fort Wood, Dad grabbed Mom, Kevin and I and said, "Let's go to the courthouse." Surprised, Mom said, "What for?" Where Dad replied, "To make it official. Kevin's both of our sons now, so let's make it official." He asked Kevin what he wanted, and soon after, Kevin became Kevin Wayne Miller. Thank you. Next, as a leader. I know it's hard to see this picture, but to give you an idea, this is D Company, that he was the platoon sergeant. As a leader, normally being staff sergeant and then a platoon sergeant as a non-commissioned officer says a lot about leadership qualities. But my dad had to go a step farther. He was a platoon sergeant in the 1st Engineer Battalion of the 1st Infantry Division of the Big Red One, the tough guys. This means he and his men were among the first to go into a hostile area, build a bridge for tanks and troops to cross, and then stay behind to dismantle or blow up the bridge. His Vietnam tour was the last 12 months, coming home September 24th, 1966. On June 8th, just 3 months from coming home, 6 days before their 5th wedding anniversary, 15 days before his 31st birthday, after sending money home, as Donna mentioned, for a washing machine instead of going on a scheduled leave, and after 12 years of serving the U.S. Army, Dad was killed in action. I'll close with this letter from his first lieutenant, the first lieutenant of his platoon, also showing that once again, Dad had to be first. This is from Company D, 1st Engineer Battalion. This letter is actually to his mother. Mom received a similar letter, but this has a little bit more detail, so I decided to bring this one to give an idea of the circumstances. This is to Ruby P. Miller. Dear Mrs. Miller, I feel I'm best qualified to answer your letter concerning your son, Platoon Sergeant Delaney E. Miller, Jr. I was his platoon leader at the time of his death. Delaney was killed instantly when an enemy mine was detonated against the vehicle in which he was riding, while his platoon was part of an American convoy. The Viet Cong ambushed this convoy, and 15 other Americans were killed in action during that battle. Your son did not suffer a bit, but he died immediately when the mine was set off, which actually began the ambush. If it was any comfort to you, an extremely heavy toll with enemy lives, was exacted by the U.S. soldiers in that battle. I hope this knowledge could relieve some of the pain of your loss. I too feel a great loss at Sergeant Miller's death. I thought he was a fine man, a first-rate soldier, and a valued friend. In all honesty, he was one of the finest non-commissioned officers I've known. If I can be further assistance to you, Mrs. Miller, please write me. Sincerely, Kevin C. Kelly, 1st Lieutenant, Executive Officer. Mom and Dad are both buried in the Lebanon Cemetery over here. Thank you all once again for the opportunity to introduce Delaney Bugs Miller. I'm so proud of what my father and all of these here have accomplished, and so proud to be from Lebanon. Thank you.
But once again, I want to say, I hope that this monument will be a place of healing. And remember that your loved ones, your heroes, our heroes, are not forgotten, and you are not alone. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our latest heroes who gave all so that we could be free. Platoon Sergeant Delaney Ernest Miller, Jr., Tech 5 Sergeant Donald Lonnie Osborne.